Yay. Right, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. My name's Councillor Katie Dye and I shall be chairing today's meeting. Can I ask that when you speak you press the button, which hopefully will work for you, and then when you finish you turn it off again. Thank you. So we're going to start with introductions from members, and we'll start on this side, please.
Good afternoon, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward, substituting for Councillor Carlisle.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Andy Rowntree from Kirkstall.
Good afternoon, Councillor Bromley from Horsforth and Rawdon.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mohammed Rafiq, Chapel Alton Ward, and also Exec Board Member for Climate, Energy, Environment and Green Spaces.
Good afternoon, Councillor Adele Ray from Bramley and Stanningley.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad from the Morton and Meanwood Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Penny Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Norma Harrington, Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adelaide Moorfield Ward.
Thank you very much. And now, officers, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, please. Shall we start from this side?
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Clerk to the Committee.
Good afternoon, Andy Hickford, Senior Project Manager from Climate, Energy and Green Spaces.
Good afternoon, Rachel Waterhouse, Policy Officer for Climate, Energy and Green Spaces.
Thank you very much, and you're all very welcome to this meeting. So I'm going to start with an apology in that we've had to shift around the agenda a little bit, and we've had to move one of the items, the Directorate update, to the December meeting. So as we go through, I'll try and keep you on track with where you are, but don't be surprised if things aren't in the order that you're expecting them. So we'll start, Toby, with going through the first 5 items which are in the order in which you're expecting them. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. So, agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item number 2, there's no exempt information which would exclude the press or the public. Item number 3, late items. There's no formal late items, but there was the supplementary pack which contains information for the item 6, the minutes of the previous meeting. Item 8, which is the strategy and resources presentation. And item 10, the Climate Action Leeds report. Declarations of interest. So, yeah, item number 4, can I ask members to declare any interests? No, thank you, Chair. And then agenda item number 5, apologies for absence. So we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Downs, Councillor Newton and Councillor Tudor, and we have also apologies from Councillor Carlisle with Councillor Thompson substituting.
Thank you very much, Toby. So we're now going to go straight on to the open forum item, and we've got 2 people who'd like to speak to us today. We'll start, Richard, with you. So if you want to just introduce yourself, and then you can start your 5-minute slot, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Dimmery. I'm the Director of Pudsey Community Project, charity in West Leeds, part of the Leeds Community Anchor Network. We operate a food bank 6 days a week for an area of 20,000 households, a community pantry, lunch club, youth and children's work, employability and bereavement work. But in the scheme of this committee, we run one of the fantastic repair cafes from around the city. And what I'm specifically here to talk about today, which is Reduce, Reuse Kids Clothes, which hopefully you have a flyer about. Reduce, Reuse Kids Clothes is open 6 days a week, 7 times a week in term time, as basically like a charity shop for children's clothes. We've got 1 part-time staff member and a team of 24 volunteers just for the clothes work. We have between 10 and 20,000 items of children's clothes and school uniform, including baby clothes, school uniform, coats, shoes and more just in our building at the moment. So if you imagine it like a charity shop for children's clothes, we allow people to come in 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday 10 till 12, Wednesday evening 6 till 8, plus monthly Saturday afternoon events and other things such as the local breeze events for school uniform. And people can take clothes for free. They can leave a donation if they want to, but the intention is that they're there to be used. The reason why we operate is to reduce the waste effects and CO2 impact of clothing, particularly children's clothes. eBay, Vinted and charity shops do really well for adult clothes, but generally speaking don't stock children's clothes. Charity shops, if you were to donate children's clothes, generally speaking, they'd either be wasted or shipped abroad with devastating local impact. We want to tackle the textile impact on the environment, which has a CO2 impact equivalent to aviation and shipping combined. But we hear a lot about aviation and shipping and not so much about the clothes that we wear, particularly children's clothes, where they get through them very, very fast. Textiles are also 9% of the annual microfiber pollution in the oceans and the most polluting industry in Europe, and responsible for 20% of global clean water pollution. So our solution is that if we can reduce our expenditure and reuse rather than purchase new, that enables a significant impact. So we operate from Pudsey. Our base there, our clothes rooms are open like a charity shop 6 days a week. And we also support other organisations around Leeds. Our clothes rooms are available to anybody. We have had people from up and down the country visiting friends as well as all around Leeds. We have Berkenshaw and Bermontofts. We have Hare Hills, Gipton and Bramley as well coming to visit. Anybody from anywhere is allowed to come. But we also support Zero Waste Leeds, particularly with uniform and coats, Leeds Baby Bank, Project Hazen in Morley, Meeting Point, Bramley Cluster, Swinnow Community Centre, the Clothing Bank, Women's Whispers, ABC Toddler Group and Baby Basics so far this year. Our 2024 stats, conservatively, because we always go lower than we expect they might be, is that we expect to be this year providing clothes to 2,500 families, so about 4,000 to 4,500 children. That'll be somewhere in the region of 20,000 items of children's clothes, school uniform. Climate-wise, that's an impact of 7 tonnes of fabric that'll be reused. And the statistics for that via Zero Waste Leeds, and we've independently verified them with the University of Manchester, it'll be a CO2 saving of 127 tonnes of CO2, the equivalent of nearly 900,000 litres of water that otherwise would have been expended in the manufacture. And that'll have a CO2 impact of the equivalent of driving a car 27 times away around the world. And that's just this year. It's grown 22% on last year, so we expect next year to be hitting 35 times away around the world as well. So this is something that's available for anybody in Leeds or beyond. It's in Pudsey. You can find our details at pudseycommunity.org.uk or looking on Facebook at Reduce Reuse Kids Clothes. There's no cost for anybody attending. People can come, they can make a contribution that goes to our charity, pays our bills and part-time staff members' salary. But a lot of people use it like a library. They might bring a couple of carrier bags of outgrown clothes and takes them away. Some people take, some people make a donation. So I want to make it available for anybody in Leeds to let you know it's there, and friendly volunteers waiting to help and support people who come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and share that with us. That's really important work and very, very impressive stats. So thank you. I'm sure as a committee we'll be more than happy to promote and share. I can see some nods around the table. So thank you very much. We will do that. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay, so our second open forum is from Horsforth Climate Action. So if you'd like to do the same, introduce yourself and then start your slot, please.
Hello, my name's Jenny Morgan. I'm from Horsforth Climate Action. We're part of one of 8 climate hubs based around Leeds that were funded by the National Lottery through funding that Climate Action Leeds got. So there was Garforth, Seacroft, Beeston and Otley that were set up in October 2020 and have now come to the end of their funding, some of which are continuing, some of which aren't. And then there's Alwoodley, Armley, Little London and Horsforth. We started a year later, so we've got ongoing funding until September 2024. And the groups were selected to reflect the diversity of the different geographical communities in Leeds, so including market towns, inner city, suburbs, etc. We have a budget for activities, and we have a hub worker who works 15 hours a week, which is me, to support the group, the hub and the activities. We opened our website in May 2024, and we promote quite a lot of the stuff that we do on social media. So the aim of the group is to enable more climate action to take place across Horsforth and to support the city's vision of being zero carbon, nature friendly and socially just. So just to give you a little overview of the areas of interest we've got a repair cafe which was launched in December 2022. That runs the first Saturday of every month and is part of a network of repair cafes across Leeds. Average fix is between 50 to 60 items each month. And at the moment we're looking into how to measure the carbon saving from the items not going to landfill. And we also have a Horsforth Library of Things. We have a very, very active nature group who've created a nature map of green spaces across Horsforth. They've set up a BioBlitz where they're measuring the biodiversity within Horsforth using the iNaturalist app. They've gone nature-friendly gardens events, they've done nature walks. We recently did one with Leeds Trinity University. We've done insect walks, birdsop walks, moth trapping, and we've got relaxed mowing on the Drury Fields area in Horsforth. We've got a food group that has a composting sort of community. We helped establish with funding from Feed Leeds a composting scheme, Inspirations Nursery, and we've now got the first community composting project on Drury Fields in Horsforth, and that's working with Compost Collective and Feed Leeds. We've done green gardening fairs, apple fairs and apple days as part of that group. We have a schools and young persons group, and we provided funding for training for teachers from Leeds Development Education Centre on environmental issues and working with primary school children around that. We've worked with uniform groups, and we've also funded litter picking kits to go out to all the primary schools in Horsforth, and they've been really well received and being used by the schools. We have a transport group, and we've just completed street audits over the summer of 3 sort of key areas in Horsforth, New Roadside, Station Road and Town Street. And that's looking at the streets from not just accessibility, but how pleasant it is to walk down them, how shaded it is, has it got seating, or is the litter provision. So it's looking at it from a sort of holistic point of view. And we're just about to publish that, and we hope to pass it on to the council, Connecting Leeds and also Horsforth Town Council. And we also organised with Leeds Cycling Campaign a kiddical mass bike ride in the summer where families went out cycling a set route round Horsforth. We're in the early days of setting up a green energy group, and we had a green energy day, and we used the thermal imaging camera and got green doctors involved with that. We also run HCA Saturdays, and we've run Saturdays. They run on the same day as the repair cafe. So we've looked at plastic pollution, gardening, we've had the apple day. We've just run a clothing exchange last Saturday, which was really successful. We've done tech and bike donations, which have gone on to Solidaritech, which passes the tech on to asylum seekers, and also the bikes go to the bike library. We've been involved in community events like the Breeze event on Drury Fields and a Barker event as well. We've done film showings, we've got done stuff with Horsforth Library and Leeds Trinity University Library around Green Libraries Week. And we've got a coming event, which again you should have some leaflets about, on the 19th of November in Alwoodley, which is a joint event with Alwoodley 2030, but also with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, looking at their report on the state of nature in Yorkshire. And we've got a Christmas event coming up as part of our HCA Saturdays. We're also looking into community membership with other community groups. We're making links with the town team and also making links with the universities, particularly Leeds Trinity University. So that's our local one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. What an awful lot of work. I think we can send huge congratulations from the whole of our committee. And one of the things that I think rolls nicely into the next item that we're going to look at is just the sheer wealth of work that's going on across the city. And it's so necessary if we're going to achieve our ambitions as a city. So thank you very much for sharing. You're both very welcome to stay if you want to. We've got seats at the side, but equally we understand you've got busy lives and you are free to go. So thank you very much for sharing. We're going to move on now to item 10. And I don't know whether you want to introduce that or whether we're going straight to Paul, Andy.
I'll give Paul a little introduction. Why not? He deserves it. So, obviously, we've been working as a council with Climate Action Leeds for some time, supporting them with the application for lottery funding. And since then, there's been a significant amount of work done. I'm not going to go into that. I don't want to eat into Paul's time. But they've been working across communities across Leeds for a number of years now. And I suppose at the stage of looking at the next steps, how they go beyond the lottery funded work and embed themselves further into Leeds. So without further ado, Paul Chatterton.
So councillors, council colleagues, thanks for making time for us in the agenda today. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Just give us a second while I navigate the digital technology, because I'm going to share what I'm doing is I'm sharing this presentation which has worked. Always good. So there'll be some slides as a prompt to go navigate the things that we're talking about. So I'm here today with Martin Flynn. I'll let Martin
Yep, Martin Flynn from Voluntary Action Leeds. I'm project coordinator on the Climate Action Leeds project, Acton, Fort Val.
Great, so thanks. So along with Martin, I'm going to take you through a quick journey, about 15 minutes, so I want plenty of time for questions and engagement. Of this entity called Climate Action Leeds, which has been around the city now for 4 years. I've been strategy lead for Climate Action Leeds for 4 years. I was one of the bid writers on the initial application to the National Lottery. So here we go, update activities and opportunities. So who are we? Let's recap. So this is a 5-year funded programme of work funded by the National Lottery, £2.5 million. So we've leveraged quite a lot of that, a lot more than that actually over the last few years we've been operating. But the key thing about Climate Action Leeds is we're a delivery partnership, right? So we're not an organisation ourselves, but there's many other constituted organisations in the city who run parts of Climate Action Leeds. So we're a diverse partnership, and they're the different logos, that make up the delivery partnership. Everything from Voluntary Action Leeds, Martin, my own organisation, Leeds Love It, Share It, and Our Future Leeds. And then we have Together for Peace, Tidal, Leeds Community Foundation, and CAD Consultants. So there's a broad range of organisations delivering our work on the ground. So we've got about another 10 months left. So it's a really good time to engage with you all now, because we've got some ambitious plans for how we finish well and where this goes. And we can see this really as like a test and learn project. How do we gear up communities in a city to tackle the agenda that you've laid out, which is how do we address the climate and ecological emergency, right? So we took our starting point from that 2019 moment, right? Youth Strike, Climate Emergency Declarations, the beginning of SEAC, as the reason why we exist as Climate Action Leeds. And that's what we've responded to since 2020. And we emerged in COVID, right? So the problem is our first year, we were all indoors. We were meant to be out on the streets, organising communities. So our first year was, a COVID year. So look, how is our work divided up? There's 3 main components, right? So the first one is we have these, what we call these sector transition partners, the different sectors where we need to make a big transition in the city. So we have 8, and I'll go through these things like work and housing and energy, the areas that need to change, right? Then we have 8 places on the map, 8 community hubs where we're organising particular communities, working with existing groups, working with many of yourselves around the room, as Jenny's mentioned, Horsforth, trying to generate a momentum in particular locations and create a legacy of climate action in those places. And then we've got this city movement building piece, how to glue it all together. Yeah, what's the kind of connections across all that, which will create a legacy in the city? What are the bits and pieces we need to really keep that momentum going in communities? Yeah, and so as Andy mentioned, we've got a formal connection with Leeds City Council and a partnership. We work closely with Leeds Climate Commission. Much of our work came out of the recommendations of the Leeds Citizens Climate Jury, right, which was a great event which you all hosted as well, and have been celebrating and advancing their recommendations. So remember, I'll always encourage us to return to those 12 recommendations of the climate change citizens jury, which are embedded now in the life of the city, and we're trying to make progress on them, and it'd be great if we could track and monitor those, as well as what we call the 13th recommendation, which came out of the Racial Justice Network, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so let's have a look at these three components briefly. So the transition partners, right? Again, there's too much stuff going on across too many areas for me to talk about everything we're doing. So these are real snapshots, real headlines, and we can return to some of the details in our Q&A. But really, this is all built on this idea of a transition. You know, we're hearing Leeds represents one kind of Leeds, we need to transition to another kind of Leeds, right? So what does that mean in terms of different sectors like housing, energy, food, transport? So building on those, your big climate conversation, which you had 2019-2020, and the Leeds Citizens Jury, we selected those key areas: energy, housing, food, nature, work and economy as one, youth education and transport. And we added climate justice based on, and do check out, and I can send you the link, the really wonderful report by the Racial Justice Network, which highlighted the importance of climate justice as a key area for us to focus on as a city. So not only are we making not only are we responding to a climate and ecological emergency, but we've got to do it in a way that is massively more socially just. And I think that's a good thing about Leeds, is that's a real priority for us as a city and for you as a council, yeah? How do we make that transition fairer, essentially, right? For all our diverse communities across the city. And that's the big one, I think. You know, it's the one we look at the university where I work. The Climate Commission's really focused on it, and certainly this committee is, yeah? So what we did with these transition partners, we employed across the city existing organisations to really try and to deliver these work streams with us. So we've got everyone from Foodwise in Leeds to Hyde Park Source. We've got a transport justice partner, and we've got some individuals working in the work and economy sector. We've got Leeds Development Education Centre, and we've got People Powered Homes and Leeds Community Homes, who I helped set up. And we've got a great group in London called Platform who work on energy justice. So they're our delivery partners in terms of mapping out what a transition would look like in those sectors. So I'm just going to mention some highlights, because that's all I've got time for, what we've been up to. Some highlights. Well, our work and economy partner has been working on what would a community wealth building strategy look like for the city to complement our really strong portfolio in inclusive growth. What would a community wealth building strategy look like for the city? And that's one of the big growth areas which we'd like to explore with you over the coming years. It's something many councils across Europe and in UK in particular, you know, what is the potential for embracing that agenda as a city and getting some pilots on the ground? Because making sure Leeds economy is not just a leaky bucket where wealth and prosperity goes out of the city is a super big priority. And a focused community wealth building strategy could really work on that. And there's amazing groundwork being done from many places you all might know about Preston, in the States, and other UK cities that have been taken on this agenda. Okay, our youth and education partner, Leeds DEC, have been working on this Leeds climate curriculum, which is amazing. They've got a national profile. They've been working across dozens of schools in Leeds. This is teacher-led stuff, creating what would a Leeds climate curriculum look like. And one of the things we want to offer really the city is how can we kind of almost kite mark that? How can we get it in, embed it in the schools of Leeds, yeah? So our young people and the communities they're embedded in have a sense of what a climate curriculum could look like. And in their everyday lives, they're learning about this stuff that we're doing in a city, at a city level. The Leeds Climate Commission is really interested in this, as is the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. There's a Climate Ambassadors programme. So getting this in schools, I think, is a top priority. A community retrofit show home, number 3. It would be amazing, and we're working hard on this with some civic partners, to have some kind of community-based retrofit show home. Because what we get is pushback is, how will this work in my street? How will this work in my community? So having that place where we can see this in real life would be great. A community nature recovery network. One of the things communities really want to get involved in, and you'll know from your grassroots work, is they want to get involved in green space, right, and tree planting. And I think having a more coordinated approach to this, creating a nature recovery network, community-led nature recovery, would be something really powerful. And our partner Hyde Park Source have been really looking into this area. With many of you, actually, we've got an ongoing project with asset management, Mark Mills and others. How do we start to bring in underused land as a way to recover nature? So a real potential there. Leeds Community Energy, another big ticket item which we really want to push forward with city partners. What would it look like to have a community cooperative owned vehicle called Leeds Community Energy, which would support the flourishing of community energy across Britain, across Leeds in the context of GB Energy, right, and the flourishing we're going to have over the coming years. So another massive potential there. Communities across Leeds are chomping at the bit to have a slice of that action, right, setting up community energy projects. So we want to create a city-owned service, right, of advice and support agency, which could do that. And we've got many meetings coming on to give some form to that. And then a big climate justice conversation. I think one of the pieces missing in the city, let's have that big conversation somehow across the city about climate and racial justice. What does this mean for diverse and underrepresented communities in the city, right? Because we don't just want this to be for, you know, the climate. The climate movement is very white and the climate movement is sometimes very privileged. How do we pull out the benefits of that to the broad communities in Leeds? So let's have a big climate justice conversation. How could we host that as a city, right? So those are some of the highlights of some of the things we're working on. We'd love some partnership from you all on that. Okay. Onto our community hubs. There they are, mapped. The exciting thing about them is points on the map: Beeston, Armley, Horsforth, Alwoodley, Little London, Seacroft and Garforth. Is we trying to get a good cross-representation across Leeds, right? And we've done fairly well. And there's an amazing amount of activity across these hubs, more than I could possibly represent here. But the fascinating thing, councillors and colleagues, is that what we've landed on the map now is 8 really kind of like emergent community organisations. They've left a legacy. They want to exist. They're all applying for funding and legal status as organisations to continue their work. And that's really great. And they could be ambassadors for the next wave. That's the really exciting thing, right? So 8 becomes 16, becomes 32, becomes 64, yeah? So let's have a few highlights. You know, there's loads of, you know, our pictures say 1,000 words, don't they? You know, things like in Garforth, community gardens, repair cafes, Seacroft, where Councillor Dice from, loads of great activities, you know, craftivism classes, seed libraries, school visits. They've all got an identity and energy in their own terms. It's great. Otley, I mean, Otley in many ways is a real beacon, is a real test bed, because they've gone on to apply for some major funding. And Otley, I'm really proud of them because they're almost like an exemplar zero carbon town for the UK, you know, like a model town. And I think what we've got in Leeds is that geography of towns really lends itself to that. And what's happening in Otley is really worth looking at. So I would certainly engage more with the people of Otley and what they're doing there. Climate, Otley 2030 is the group, yeah. And look, a selection from others. Otley 2023, you know, doing this amazing walk to school week we're going to hear more about in a second. The Repair Cafe, Community Fridge, the Nature Horsforth Group, Little London Clean Air Cafe, Tree Planting, Beeston Energy Savings Handbook, Bin Yard Project. It goes on, councillors. There are loads of great stuff happening, you know, projects on the ground which will continue. Another example, we've CAG, our evaluation partner, worked on a carbon calculator. Yeah, and we can start to apply this to different areas. And we applied it to Alwoodley Walk to School Week as an example for you all. So what you do is essentially you just scale up. And I think we heard some of this earlier, didn't we? You scale up from a particular day. So, for example, on their walk to school week, they estimated 4 tonnes of CO2 a year. But we scaled to all primary schools in Leeds, 10 tonnes. And then if you do an annual savings, which means locking that in annually, 130 tonnes of CO2. Now, we know the challenge is massive in Leeds because there's 4 million, just under 4 million tonnes a year carbon emissions, right? But every tonne's going to count, right? And every activity is going to count. So we're starting to do this kind of carbon calculator work, and we'd love to share this with you, right, across communities. Okay, so where else does this go? Just last few slides. We're really proud of Imagine Leeds. It's our city centre climate hub, and we're in, many of you might have come down, we were in City Exchange in the Trinity Quarter, now they're refurbishing it. We've just got a new premise which is opening later this month, Blenheim Terrace, which is, you know, the kind of terrace up towards the university, just off campus. Now, we're going to be in there till May. So the university's founded that space and sponsored that space on our behalf, but it's going to be a civic, open, public space. We've got 3 floors, loads of rooms, we've got volunteers to run it. So an open offer to you all, come and use Blenheim Terrace. It's Leeds' climate action hub for the next 6 months. Really exciting. Have your meetings down there, come down to us. It's affordable to use, it's free to use for many activities, yeah, and it's going to be a great location. I'm going to talk more about, you know, the point is we want to develop this opportunity as a point on the map to secure longer term funding. We need, look at all the amazing development happening in Leeds. Over 10 years, this city is going to be unrecognisable. We need a permanent home for climate action in the city centre. So that's one thing we're laser focused on, getting a permanent home for Imagine Leeds. Because we want this one-stop shop in it. And a one-stop shop, as many of you might know, like we've got in Miriam House, is a one-stop climate shop, right? So where do you go for advice on retrofitting houses, for community gardens, for food growing, all that kind of stuff? So having that one-stop shop, I think, would be invaluable for the city. So let's all focus on what that would look like. And I think it would be a great thing for us to sponsor. One of the guiding frameworks we've got is the Leeds Donut. Now, again, this is it sounds a bit quirky why I'm talking about donuts, but the Leeds Donut comes from this international work by Kate Raworth, who wrote this book, Donut Economics. And it's a new economic guide for how cities can develop in the 21st century. So I mention it very briefly here because we've got this whole group who's focused on doing a city portrait, which I helped author. And where does the city go from here in terms of balancing the economy with the environment, with social justice? And our donut economics work can really help with this. And we're doing community pilots in Roundhay and Gipton. How do we really start to change the economy in those places to make them work for those places, right? And this is what the donut's about. So a donut's like a circle, right, of course. And if you're outside the donut, it's not safe. The whole idea is how do you get into the donut where it is safe, right? And so what we found in life in Leeds is mainly outside of the donut. People aren't living safe lives in all sorts of ways. So how do we make life in Leeds a bit safer? And that's what the donut's about. We could come back and do a longer, or if you want to do other meetings, we can do a whole workshop on like the results we got from Leeds and where do we go next with that. So we'd love to come back and do that if that's of interest. So impacts and highlights then. All sorts of highlights we want to point you towards to show you the kind of things we've been doing and we're going to keep doing. You know, nearly 10,000 people taking part in activities, 1,000 volunteers. You know, this is just year 4, more than 4,900 people engaged across 175 events. 5,000 people came to our city centre hub, Imagine Leeds. We had 130 children in 13 schools at our climate summit. 5,000 kilos of food diverted from landfill, 100 trees planted. 1,000 items repaired. For you know, the impact goes on. You know, we had this really exciting, and Councillor Dye was there. We had this policy round table where we were looking at how do we take some of these priorities forward. So we're already moving on that work. We had old micro grants and a small grant scheme run by our partner Together for Peace, where so we distributed some major community pots of money to promote this kind of work across Leeds. So our 5-year planning journey, so where does all this go? So look, we're calling it the megaphone. So the idea, Councillor Dow, just checking on time, how many minutes have I got left?
I'm just conscious of the time that you need to leave. So
no, okay,
judge it yourself on when you need to leave, but leaving some time for questions.
That's brilliant. I've got 2 or 3 more minutes to go. I've got plenty of time for questions then, great. So we're just, we use this kind of megaphone approach because where do we go from here? So the small end of the megaphone is where we started, and we want to kind of have this moment where we leave this big legacy of projects to continue by the time we finish in year 5. Moving towards the 2030s, which is linked to your ambitions around being carbon neutral by the 2030s, yeah? How do we create not just a zero carbon Leeds in the 2030s, but something which is more socially just and nature friendly, yeah? That's the key thing, bringing those 3 things together. Real nature friendly city, a zero carbon city, but more equal city as well, yeah? So we're doing some planning work. The final thing, we've got this kind of planning work we're doing. Yeah, we're like, where does this all go? So we're actually convening a few meetings about, we think it would be great to have a climate and nature plan for the city. And we think it would be great for a group like you to endorse that and scrutinise it. Yeah. And we're starting to have conversations with the Leeds Climate Commission, with some of my colleagues at the university, with some council officers, Andy's been involved, about what would that look like? Say if the next 12 months we created a climate and nature plan for Leeds, something we could all get behind as a city, yeah? Because you have some amazing updates there, but I think it's bringing it all together. It might not be a new piece of work, but it's like, where are we at and where do we need to get to? So look at that, you know, there's a little line there, isn't there? Where are we now? You know, we're doing amazing stuff, but will we get to where we need to be? Do we even know where we need to be? Where do we want to be in 2030? What does Leeds look like? We do a lot of this kind of stuff, don't we, as a city? And what's missing? What are the missing bits, yeah? So what do we need to do more of? And what we're not doing at all, and what's going to get us over the line. So what's that gap? So on the PowerPoint picture there, what's the gap? Yeah? What do we need to do more of? You know, we've got this amazing transport strategy, amazing, you know, park strategy, net zero housing strategy. How do we really make this shift? Because we know we've got the baseline, you know, just under 4 million tonnes of CO2 emissions a year. It's not going down that quickly, and it's not going down quickly enough. So we know that. What more do we need to do as a city? So I think that's a challenge we'd like to lay down and work on more. So our offer to you, use of Imagine Leeds right now, Blenheim Terrace. That's from mid-November, so keep that in mind and get in touch with us. Networking and joint planning, we just mentioned that, you know, so we'd love to embark upon that journey with you, building on, of course, the Climate Commission's work there and on the planning they're doing. We've got a dedicated training lead, so we can call on them, doing training workshops and all sorts of stuff that we're leading on. Got our access to our community hubs and our transition partners who are working on the ground, so don't hesitate to contact us in any of those topic or place areas, yeah? Because we want to inspire and mobilise others, so we want to use this as a kind of platform, you know, a springboard really for more. And that Leeds Donut I mentioned, and our carbon calculator and our case study. So we've got a lot of resources there we'd like to offer to you, so and we're going to put out there for you to use. And then future asks. So we really would like that active partnership with Imagine Leeds. We'd really like to get that co-owned, yeah, with the city as a not just our project but the city's project, and really go on the hunt for a really great building. We appreciate Leeds City Council hasn't got a magic building for us, we know that, but we know there's lots of development happening in the city, and we know that this should, you know, this is a missing piece of the jigsaw for the city centre. Joint work on some of those key areas like Leeds Community Energy, it'd be great to have that co-owned with you. Leeds Climate Curriculum, maybe kite march, you know, quality kite march, something we can get into all the schools. Use of the Leeds Donut approach, we can, you know, we can do workshops with officers, closer strategic relations and connections, yeah, and use as an active partner in any funding bids. So we're gearing up with a fundraising strategy, and we know that this time next year our core funding will have run out. So we need to get some community organisers back on the ground, paid, some campaigning staff, some secretariat help, just to keep the organisation running while we look for some further funding, right? Because I think these 5 years has just been really getting ourselves up off the ground, even though it's been 5 years' work. Okay, look, I want to make sure that I'm not Martin has a contribution, but that's all from me. Martin, what else would you like to add from your perspective before I open for Q&A?
I don't think there's much that I can add in terms of summarising the project. So yeah, conscious of probably more helpful if there's just time for questions, and we can try and cover as many of those as we can from you guys in the next 15 minutes or so.
Thank you for listening. Hope that was informative, and probably plenty of time for a quick chat, yeah?
Thank you very much. Lots in there, Paul. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing that with us. Can I have indications of people who'd like to ask a question or make a point? We'll start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Paul. That was really interesting and insightful, and a lot to think about. Particularly keen to pick up on the education thread, so I'll be in touch about that. I'll speak to Councillor Hayden and see if there are options there. I'm really interested in community energy as well, so I'll be in touch via the chair about that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Can I just sneak in before I bring Councillor Bromley in and say I'm particularly interested in the education piece of work as well, so that if we can link together about that, because I've already had a few conversations about things that we can do together, so that would be a really powerful piece of work. Sorry, Paul, you go.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, and I think Leeds Deck, you know, the people there, Hannah and Adam, and you might know, and there's people working on the ground there with Sarah Fishwick and others, and I think the key thing is they want to do quite a detailed longitudinal work in schools as well, like when you introduce this new material, how does it affect the kids over a number of years? So not just like in and out, but then if you track it over the lifetime of the kids at school, how does it change how they see themselves in their communities? So selecting some schools and getting some funding to do that longitudinal would be really good as well, yeah.
Are you wanted to come in on this one? Yeah, of course, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to come very quickly on that. I'd be really interested in joining in with this as well. So our community green group in Boston's Bar and Wetherby, we've been going into all the primary schools in the area for the last, over the last about 4 years. So I'd be really interested in finding out how we could look at sort of the long-term effect of that and how we could improve what we're doing. So I'd be very interested in being part of that.
So looking forward to an email exchange. We can convene some further meeting with you all there with our DEC partners. Yeah, great.
I think that would be a really good idea. It'd be a good initial way forward, wouldn't it? Those of us who are interested, perhaps Rachel, if we could hand that one over to you to kind of bring together a meeting of people who are interested in moving the educational piece of work forwards, and maybe invite Councillor Hayden as well if she would like to come and join us. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bromley.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I'd like to join that group as well, though I'm sure there's many of us that would be interested. In terms of, you talked about a couple of areas that have already like a system that working with the donut economics. I just wondered if you could let us know what that looks like at the moment and how that works so far.
Great, thank you. And have you met our donut group? Have you done work on that already with us, or no?
I'm aware of donut economics.
Right, okay. So it works on two levels. We did this kind of snapshot city, really high-level city portrait. We tracked 39 indicators, which are internationally recognised, which other places use. There's this amazing international community called the Donut Economics Action Lab Deal. I can send these web links to circulate to you all. So there's groups all around the world doing this on their place. So we refined those 39 indicators, which many other cities are copying now, because we did a lot of hard work on choosing the best. And you use those indicators to see whether you're in or out of the donut. And some of them are local indicators, some of them are global indicators, like are you looking after people well locally, and are you looking after people well globally? And then it also looks at like how are people doing in Leeds socially, and how's Leeds doing environmentally. So it's quite multi-dimensional. And 36 out of the 39 indicators showed Leeds unsafe outside of the donut. I mean, that's of no surprise, because we know, like, we've been hit by austerity and and all sorts of stuff, right, in Leeds. And Leeds is no different to many other big cities. It's not like nothing particular is going on. But then it's just a bit of a compass. What do you need to start to change to get more of those indicators back into the safe bit of the donut? And you can see the donut, like the middle bit is what we call a floor, where it's you fall below the social floor and you're not safe. The outside edge is like we call it a ceiling, where you're harming the ecological ceiling. So you want to kind of stay in the middle ring bit. So it'd be great to do a workshop. We can like explore that with you, and what communities can start to do to become a bit more safe in the face of future challenges. And then our second bit of work is doing that at community level. So Jenny Brooks, our donut lead, is working in Gipton and Roundhay, and we've done a bit of work in Seacroft as well. Like, how can you start these donut-style conversations with community groups? And you could do a little community portrait, which is quite nice. There's a methodology for doing that. So if you're interested, I mean, again, it's all resources and people on the ground. It can't happen magically. It's got to takes a bit of time, but we can go for funding. It's a nice approach. It gets people, because the great thing about the donut is you draw circles straight away, and everyone gets it. Whether you're 8 or 80, you can suddenly get the idea that you need to be within that circle, and outside of the circle is not a good place to be. So it's a great community engagement tool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that work pans out in Roundhay and Gipton. I think those two being mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions or comments? Councillor Shazad.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. Really helpful. Again, you mentioned getting diverse communities involved. What is your plan for this? Because we've had this climate action now for many years, and I think we're still stuck at that same point of getting more diverse groups and communities involved. And as you said, it all still looks like a middle-class setup of white people who are concerned about the climate, but nobody else from the other communities getting involved or taking part in some of these hubs or setting up some hubs. I mean, obviously, you've got Gipton, Hare Hills, you've got Beeston. I know there's a hub there, but how many people from diverse communities are actually getting involved in these hubs?
Yep. Should we have this together?
Yeah, I can answer about that. No, it's a really good question, an important question. I think there's a couple of different answers to it. partly it's ongoing work within the partnership based on feedback from the Racial Justice Network, who previously were one of our partners, and listening to people both inside and outside the partnership just on an ongoing basis as well, for the partnership to kind of review how it's trying to collaborate with and listen to more diverse communities in the city, both from colleagues at Cal and also just across Leeds. So looking at how our governance, communications, the way the partnership's set up is as, what the word be, well calibrated as possible, so that climate justice, both more broadly and at a local level, is kind of embedded across what we're doing. And that's an ongoing conversation that we know we need to address and do a better job of. In the, I suppose, at more ground level, particularly over the past 6 months when a bit of additional resource has come up, we've kind of really increased our efforts to be proactively reaching out and listening to communities, sort of going out to both individuals and also established community organisations in parts of the city that are either run by or run for individuals from diverse backgrounds, to hear what their priorities are, what any barriers to access might be, what they're already doing, to see how we can sort of learn from that, listen to that, support that, and then also identify down the track potential collaborations in future. So that's been conversations with the likes of, just to give some examples, Afrikindness, Hare Hills Action Team, Leeds Refugee Forum, also a couple of researchers at University of Leeds and University of Bradford that are researching climate justice as well. So we're looking to support their work by helping to put them in touch with community participants and hopefully in the longer term create some resources around climate justice, but very much being led by those researchers and their expertise to try and add some value where we can. So it's an area that we're really conscious that we need to do better at, and we're trying to address that in different ways. But hopefully with these kind of various events we've had and conversations we've had over the past few months, and then things we've got lined up over the next few months with some of those organisations that I've mentioned, we'll kind of continue to do a better job with that. I think it's probably important to mention as well that at local level, some of the community hubs have done some really good work in this kind of space already, in terms of working with and being run by people from diverse backgrounds themselves. So that might be the likes of Hare Hills Action Team getting involved on sustainable fashion. There's some details of that on our blog on the Climate Action Leeds website, and our Future Beeston as well, and Woodhouse and Little London Hub, doing events with accessibility in mind. So for people who don't necessarily have English as a first language, or might not have the confidence, or might not have the kind of necessarily feel sort of culturally comfortable in all different types of formats of events. I know they ran a really successful event aimed at families, the majority of whom came along from Arabic-speaking backgrounds, on a tree planting event in the area. So some of the hubs at local level have done some really good stuff on that. But I think as a partnership, we do need to do a much better job and show that we are improving in that sense. Does that kind of cover some of what you were interested in?
Yeah, it does kind of cover some of what I'm interested in, but I'd like to see how maybe you could look at your team and maybe include some diversity and inclusion in there, and maybe get some ambassadors for the climate change that can actually represent the communities more and look a bit more diverse, because more or less every time we have a meeting we normally see the same faces and from the same backgrounds, and there doesn't seem to be much diversity going on in the actual whole setup as per se. There's probably people there, but we don't actually see them as the front faces. There might be people helping with the admin and other stuff, but maybe it would help to maybe have some faces of the different colours getting involved, some ambassadors, or maybe going out and talking to communities. There's lots of people in the city who are very well known. Maybe they could be used as ambassadors for climate change, who are from diverse backgrounds, and that might actually help encourage other communities to get involved.
And it's a point well taken, and thanks for making it. And it's good to hit home with us repeatedly on that key message. And I think one of the things that our former climate racial justice partner, Racial Justice Network, really helped with was kind of reinforcing the message around allyship and sponsorship, you know what I mean, like that. You said, like, so we're working hard to bring into leadership positions in this last year more diverse representation. I think that's where we want to get to by the end of the project. So so we're not doing well enough. We know that, and we want to get to that place, yeah, as an exit strategy. So like when we start to go forward to grow this movement, that's like one of the legacies we're leaving, yeah. So we can step back and create a space, structural power to pass it on to those people that tend to be underrepresented in like powerful situations in the city. Yeah, good. Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, and hold us to that. Like, we don't want to come back and then keep making the same mistakes and say, well, you didn't really do very much, did you? So yeah, please hold us to that. And we'd also like to really sponsor that kind of bigger conversation in the city about climate, racial justice, and what that means for the different institutions in the city. My own institution, Leeds, the university, and the council and the commission. We're all struggling to break through on this issue. We need to make more of an effort and double down and get together, share best practice, and crack it actually. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Thank you for the responses. Anybody else got any questions, comments on this item? Councillor Stables.
I was just wondering whether it would be possible, we've been talking previously about possible workshops, whether we could do ourselves a Leeds donor economics workshop.
By all means, if people would be interested in attending, we've already had one question about that. I think that'd be great. Yeah, if you'd be happy to do that for us. Thank you. So just before I bring this item to a close, is there anything you wanted to come in on, Andy?
I think the main thing would be that it's just about continuing to engage with Climate Action Leeds and all the different community groups that form Climate Action Leeds. I know we've got Paul and colleagues in Climate Action Leeds, and I and Martin Elliott have got some work we're planning to undertake in the very near future, touching on something that Paul raised in terms of trying to bring together the different strategies that exist in the council to create I suppose more of a singular picture of what Leeds needs to look like, and net zero Leeds should look like in 2030 and beyond. Not so much in terms of, I suppose, rewriting strategies, but bringing it together so it's more understandable, so it's a clearer image. And I think some of that really echoes some of Councillor Shadad's points as well about helping people understand what a net zero Leeds needs to look like and will look like, and helping to break down some of the abstract ideas about what climate emergency is. I think very much there is a clear tendency for the climate emergency to be seen as a bit of a white middle class concern, and it's a privilege to, I suppose, have a headspace to be worried about a climate emergency. But some of the solutions and some of the steps that will get us to a net zero Leeds can actually assist with some of the acute issues that communities face. Things like crime, that sort of safer streets can be delivered through more active travel, people being visible, lower carbon diets, for example, rich in fruit and vegetables, can help with health outcomes, and reuse of materials can help circular economy and help how we can look at growing local economies and so on. So these are things that can help with concerns about antisocial behaviour, joblessness, poverty, health outcomes. Similarly, retrofitting homes, which is something we're working on. We're currently working on a bid to do about 4,000 homes in the next couple of years. These are things that will have positive outcomes. People not having to choose between heating and eating. So I think it's really good that we've got such an active community group, because as a council we're not always able to reach certain areas, certain communities, and I think if we can work effectively with Climate Action Leeds, it'll help break that down, it'll help explain the climate emergency better, and ultimately that will hopefully get us all towards our objectives to 2030. So I mean, for me it's been great working with Paul over the last few years, and I think there's a lot of good work we've been doing, and I just would hope that we can all support that continuing.
Thank you. Okay, so just to draw that item to a close, if you look at the recommendation, we're asked to note the presentation and to consider requests for support from Climate Action Leeds and to use feedback to develop ongoing alignment in net zero delivery between Climate Action Leeds and Leeds City Council. I think we can all support that as a recommendation. And then just summing up, hopefully if you, Paul, look at the future asks that you've asked of us in your slide. I think we've committed to making progress on a number of those, and also if you look at our offer to you, then you've kind of committed to us in that. So I think that's really, really impressive, and I would encourage everybody here to make contact. I mean, I've found working as part of Climate Action Seacroft really, really powerful. And you've seen the example from, both our contributors in the open forum, that working in the community is really, really important, and it's absolutely vital for us to do that if we're going to get our net zero targets. So, can I ask that the slides are shared? Because I think at the moment I'm the only one who's got a copy of them. And then you can all see what Climate Action Leeds has promised us and what they've asked of us. And also contact details are on there. And I would say please do make contact. And I'm sure you'd be happy to hear from people, wouldn't you, particularly Paul? And we've also talked about the education piece and I think that sums it up. Yep, all the things that I wanted to say. Oh, donuts. Yeah, sorry, I put that on the back. And I didn't put it in my recommendations, and the donut as well. So, yep. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Councillor, on the way out, I'll leave you a couple of our brochures, including one of the donut ones. I'll just pass them down, yeah. Great.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming. Appreciate that. Cheers. Okay, so we are going backwards now along the agenda, as I promised at the beginning, and we're now going on to item 9, which is the Leeds Anchor Networks update. Andrew, do you want to introduce that and introduce visitors? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. My name's Andrew White. I'm a Senior Project Manager in Climate, Energy and Green Spaces. I'm going to provide a very, very, very brief introduction, and then I'm going to let Chris and Lorraine talk you through what they're doing as part of their work on net zero. I'm not sure we're going to mention donuts again. I'm just going to do a very, very brief introduction first, and then hand you over. So the covering report that we shared ahead of the agenda is really just an outline, and apologies if you've seen this before because you're aware of what the Leeds Anchors Network do, but I wanted to reiterate it and just to try and make the links with the larger institutions in the city. So the Leeds Anchors Network, when the profile of the Leeds Anchors Network was most recently updated, employ over 55,000 people, spent over £720 million in the Leeds economy, and since started measuring the CO2 emissions in 2018, have reduced their CO2 emissions by over 21,000 tonnes in the first 3 years that they've started working together. And I know that we're going to talk a bit more about that from the presentations. So specifically, there's a climate subgroup as part of the Leeds Anchors Network. The attendance from the council is shared between employment and skills and climate, energy and green spaces. There's generally one representative from each of the services, obviously because of the links there in terms of net zero and also inclusive growth, green jobs, green skills, new skills, and particularly those shared areas of development and progression. So I've kept the introductory report really brief. I'm just going to introduce them and then hand over. So Chris Kelly from Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust and Lorraine Williams-Jones from the University of Leeds. They both generously agreed to do a presentation and then take questions and answers. And Chris, you're going to go first if you can log in on the system.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for having me attend the committee this afternoon. It's a pleasure. I have requested to log on to the Teams call, so I don't know if somebody could just allow me into the meeting and then I can share my slides. Thank you. Okay. So again, thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Chris Kelly, Associate Director of Estates Compliance and Risk. So I work in the Estates and Facilities Department at Leeds Teaching Hospitals. And what I want to do today is give you an overview of some of the progress that we've been making as a trust on our journey to net zero. So first of all, just setting the scene, climate change and the NHS. So in 2020, the NHS became the first healthcare system in the world to commit to reaching net zero. NHS carbon footprint, so this is for emissions that we control directly. They have to be net zero by 2040. And then the NHS carbon footprint plus for the emissions that we can influence net zero by 2045. So they're the two kind of milestone targets that we're working towards. So what we're really focusing on as an organisation is what we can influence. So if you can see the scope 1 and 2 emissions there, the carbon footprint, you can see how that's made up. So that's by no way our total carbon footprint as an organisation, but this is what we report to NHS England, and we've been doing that now for 10 years. So a little bit about how Leeds Teaching Hospitals approaches sustainability and net zero. So this year I was delighted to see that the organisation had committed to sustainability of being one of its 7 commitments in year. So a really powerful statement. We have said for a number of years now that we want to become one of the greenest trusts in the UK. So it's great that at board level that message is clear. That really helps us to be able to commit to the green agenda. It helps us in terms of getting momentum and buy-in at all levels, and that's where we've really found some progress to be made over recent years. So the NHS accounts for 5% of the UK's carbon emissions, so a large proportion. And the NHS objective to be net zero by 2040, as we've said, is something that we know is a real challenge, so we have to make that commitment and we have to do it now and start making that progress to make sure we're on that trajectory to net zero 2040. So a little bit about our carbon impact. We've been measuring since our baseline year of 2013-14, and that is validated independently. So we bring in a consultancy to review our carbon footprint and undertake our review each year. That is then presented to a trust board. So we ensure they've got oversight at board level for that. We have reduced our carbon footprint by 37% over the last 10 years, so we're making some significant progress. You can see there how our carbon footprint, our reportable carbon footprint to NHS England is made up of those key areas there. So there are scope 1 and 2 emissions which are within our influence. So our roadmap to net zero carbon 2040, the red line there, you can see that's the national targets which all trusts have been asked to meet. The blue emissions, the reduction with the decarbonisation roadmap intervention. So we have had decarbonisation strategies undertaken across the whole of our estate. We have just over 500,000 square metres of estate from LGI to St James, Seacroft, Chapel Allerton, right out to Wharfdale. And we've got a strategy for each site, which tells us what we need to do at what stages. So that's staged approach. A lot of that is around reduction of use of fossil fuels, so gas. So a very challenging task. We also then have the new hospital site, which we're hoping to construct at the LGI, just around the corner here. That's massive for us. That building will be a flagship design and construction and operation. It will be net zero. And what that enables us to do is come out of a lot of the old aged estate at the LGI, which is very inefficient, very energy consuming. We also then have if we look at the green line, that includes the generating station complex. So that facility is shared between the Trust and the University of Leeds. It's a power station, essentially, a small power station that supplies critical building services to our estate and campus. So again, that is something that is heavily reliant on consumption of gas and a big challenge in itself to decarbonise, but one that we're looking to do collaboratively with the university. So we do estimate to be on trajectory, but what that means is, yes, we know what we need to do. We need the capital to do it. So it's very much reliant on the likes of public sector decarbonisation scheme funding, of which we've had around 22 million over the last 3 or 4 years. So that external pot of funding there to tap into that is great. What we need is more capital for the green agenda for net zero. The majority of our capital is spent on patient safety related issues and patient experience. Money for the net zero agenda is not currently funded in the capital plan, so we are reliant on that external funding, bringing that into the organisation. Just want to share some good news stories as well here. So over the last 6 months, we have developed a project group called Lean to Green, and they are utilising the Leeds improvement method. So that is around kind of lean healthcare principles using Kaizen methodology. We've got clinical leadership now on sustainability, 2 doctors who head that up for us. And what we've been doing is reaching out across the organisation. We've 22,000 staff at Leeds. So what can we do to engage those 22,000 people to be champions around sustainability? What can they do to contribute? It can be the most minor things. It can be stuff working as an individual, as a group, as a department. How do we empower our staff? You know, we see that as our greatest strength. So we've been looking at a lot of work in clinical areas across 5 high impact areas. And over the last 6 months, we've made some significant carbon and financial savings through those focus working groups. That is very much a blueprint of success for us now, and we're looking to expand the scope of the Lean to Green project work group. And the feedback that we're receiving from staff across the organisation is great. They feel engaged on sustainability. They feel as though they're able to contribute in that area. And as I've said, with it being part of the 7 commitments this year as an organisation, that's great feedback that everybody feels as though they can contribute to that commitment. So a few focus areas. You may have heard of the Leeds Teaching Hospitals Green Plan. Every trust now has to have a green plan. We've had one for a number of years. I think we're on we'll be coming up to our 4th iteration of that next year on the refresh. The green plan is the sustainability strategy for the organisation. It's very much an umbrella document with a number of then individual documents that sit beneath that, such as a travel plan, a decarbonisation strategy, a climate change adaptation plan. But it all comes under the umbrella of the green plan. And there's just a list there of some of the focus areas that we are looking at as part of the green plan. We have a sustainability strategic group with a sustainable action plan, which has a number of identified actions across all these key areas. We have leadership then and accountability throughout the organisation for those actions, and then we monitor those throughout the year. So we're making really good progress, and we look forward to releasing our next green plan next year. It should be ready for the 1st of April, which again will demonstrate progress in all these areas. Finally, thank you for listening, and opportunity for any questions, please.
Thank you very much. Shall we do questions on this particular bit first and then we'll move on to the second presentation? Are we happy with that? Okay, so any questions, comments? Councillor Rose first.
Hi, thank you for that. It's really interesting and to see the progress you're making. One thing I notice in the day-to-day thing is use and the amount of waste that I assume is replicated with medications that are changed frequently, dressings, so he has dressings done by district nurses every other day, scissors that just go in the bin, dressing packs that can't go back, expensive dressings that are prescribed and then get changed as well. Is there any way of being able to minimise that? Because it must be masses over the year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the big shift for us is bringing the clinical leadership in on sustainability now. So it's been very much a estates and facilities led thing. It's been around decarbonisation of the estates, so looking at reduction of gas, introduction of renewable technologies. What we're trying to do now is through Lean to Green is focus on clinical areas and procedures, things that they do. So a good example would be the medication. What we were finding before is the typical blister packs, they might utilise a number of them and then they'd go to waste. They're actually being recycled now, so any of the unused medication is going back into circulation and being reprocessed and packaged then to be used. And we're looking at £1 million a year saving just from something as simple as that. So you're right, there's so many different things to go at. And I think the Leeds improvement method, it's all about identifying waste. So using something what clinical staff are already aware of around Leeds improvement method, looking at how they can utilise that to identify waste and sustainability through single-use equipment and stuff like that. We're going to make some real progress. So I'm looking to build on the success of this last 6 months and like I say, widen that scope.
Thank you. Councillor Rowntree was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I've got two things I'd like to ask, if you'll permit me. One was thinking about your Lean to Green programme and staff engagement. It certainly sounds like there's sort of a deep engagement going on there, and there are people seriously invested in it. I'm wondering if it's also broad and it's sort of widely taken up across staff, or is it something that's where you tend to have an enthusiastic few who are deeply into this and it may be passing others by, or is it something you can get everybody to or nearly everybody to buy into? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think first of all, as an organisation, we are carbon literate silver accreditation. So we've at board level through senior management. There's many of us now. I think there's over 100 which have undertaken the carbon literacy training. How do we make that open for everybody? So that's something that we've been grappling with. So we have now provided carbon literacy training to all staff. I'd say getting them to take up on that offer is difficult, and it's something that we're trying to encourage. But you're right, we do have sustainability champions. So each of our clinical service units or corporate service units, we try and have a sustainability champion within that area who can kind of spread the news, share good practice, look for opportunities, and we use something called GRASP rewards, which almost like a competing league table of sustainability initiatives where you can look at who's outperforming each other. So there's stuff there that we're doing to try and generate engagement and interest, but I still think there's work to do to get more uptake, let's say, on the carbon literacy and support those people to do work in their areas.
Oh, thank you. So is it fair to say that it's part of management's expectations of how staff will perform, that you're only doing your job 100% if you're sort of actively considering the carbon implications of what you're doing and acting accordingly, as well as whatever the sort of main thrust of your role is? And
yeah, I think there's obviously different roles at the organisation which will have a different level of ability to be able to impact on this in this area. And I think you know, expecting kind of 22,000 people in the variety of roles that we do to undertake the training, it's not really something that we'd be able to deliver. But I think it's making sure that those people who can contribute and do have the good ideas and do see things in their areas, because you know, I don't know what's going on all the way across the trust, but there's people working in their local areas which will see things and do things and go, do you know what, we could do that differently. And I think that's the key to it. It's looking at what we do and trying to find different ways to do it. So you do need those people, those eyes and ears out there to come and champion those ideas, and hopefully we can then support them.
Thanks. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you is you spoke about the new building, which is great, obviously. I'm just wondering what scope there is for retrofitting, because obviously there are sort of parts of the LGI and St James's as well that go back to the 19th century and were once upon a time heated by people putting coal on fires, I would imagine. So for archaic legacy structures like that, and I'm sure there's probably a listed building element in there as well. What are your thoughts on retrofitting that and heating those buildings in a 21st century way?
Yeah, so firstly with the LGI, the new hospital, fingers crossed if we get the news we're expecting in January, that does help us address majority of the net zero decarbonisation complications of the LGI site. It will leave us with only Jubilee Wing, which is our newer estate on that site, and then the generating station complex, which serves the university campus and Jubilee. So that will massively reduce the scope of what's required for that site if we can deliver that new hospital. Your reference to St James, again, large acute estate, a real mixture of aged buildings and challenges. The £22 million that we've secured through public sector decarbonisation scheme funding has been directed in the main at St James University Hospital, and what we've done there is development of a low carbon network, and that's actually got a connection into Leeds Pipes district heat network, which is owned by the council, and we're now benefiting from that low carbon heat onto that estate. We do have additional capacity in that network as well. Again, it's down to availability of funding, whether that's external or internal capital, but we've got capacity in our low carbon network now to further de-steam the site and reduce our reliance on gas consumption for heating and hot water across that estate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that questions and answers. Next on the list is Councillor Stables.
Thank you very much. So just following on from the point you just made actually about heating, great to hear that the Leeds Pipes heating system is going to be going in, if not already in. But I'm just wondering whether, in terms of powering for the electricity usage within the hospitals, whether you're looking at solar and batteries at all.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, the main generation of electricity in our hospitals is through combined heat and power plants. So we burn gas to create electricity on site. So when you look at our carbon footprint, the bulk of the reportable emissions are around gas consumption. So that's going to be the biggest problem, because there's a real financial benefit from generating your own electricity on site. So what do we do to decarbonise that? That's a challenge to our energy providers, our partners for each of the sites. And it will be looking at things like introducing alternative means of fuel, so thinking around hydrogen, what are going to be the possibilities going forwards with that. Then also we have to consider importing grid electric. So how green is the grid, and what does that cost if we want to import green electric? So there is alternatives, there is opportunities. And again, it will come down to that, putting that in front of the trust board around what's more important, the financial benefit or achieving carbon net zero. So yeah, there's some difficult conversations going forwards, but there is opportunities, and there is hopefully the right fit for the trust.
you haven't mentioned about solar PV, which I'm a bit disappointed
Yeah, sorry,
about.
apologies. Yeah, I can add to that. So we have just installed solar PV at Chapel Allerton Hospital. We've also done a large carport canopy at our Wharfdale Hospital, and they are generating significant amount of electrical capacity into the network, and the consumption now I think has been halved in terms of grid consumption for Wharfdale. The problem that we have on the main site, so thinking about back to St James, we have limitations around the renewable technologies that we can integrate into the site. That's because we have fault limiting restrictions on our network. We are at capacity in terms of our electrical connection. So again, that requires a mass amount of investment. We are currently developing a business case for a HV incoming upgrade, but you're looking at kind of £15 million, something like that. So again, it's significant investment that's required to be able to unlock the potential of the likes of mass solar or battery storage for the St James site.
Okay, thank you. And just one other one, sorry. Coming back to the waste, I'm just wondering whether, as well as trying to eliminate waste overall, you're looking at the reduction of single-use plastics and alternative non-plastic materials that could be used?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's something that that the Lean to Green team is picking up to look at the opportunities within clinical areas about materials, products that we use. One thing that they're looking at the moment is around drapes and gowns. They're currently single use. So we've having conversations with a supplier that takes them away, treats them, and then we can reuse them again. So there is opportunities there, and our procurement colleagues at the trust are keen to further work on these opportunities.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on this presentation? Councillor Rafiq.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and it clearly shows there's a lot of work going on. And I think for us as a city to achieve net zero, it's not just a council. We need all our partners, and first and foremost our public institutions, to be on board. And I think what you described, and we know that there's a lot going on, and like I think even with the council, there's more could be done. And in terms of Leeds, you're already part of the Leeds Pipes district heating scheme. I know St James is on it as well, and I hope we get the new building across the road. It's much needed, given. But I think as a cabinet lead for climate energy in these, together with Councillor Dye, anything you think we could, or this committee, we could do better with the council, then we are always open to suggestions where we do any joint projects. I think that would be more than welcome, or any suggestions you have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the collaboration piece is massive. Also around some alignment, I think, as well. So just as a perfect comparison here with Lorraine sat to my left. We're talking about the generating station complex, which is a shared asset with a high carbon footprint. The university's target for net zero is 2030. The trust's target for net zero is 2040, but yet we've got a shared asset that requires mass amounts of investment to decarbonise. So at what point do we do it? And yeah, I think it's that kind of stuff which, if we all had a shared target, it might make things a bit easier in terms of collaboration and joint working across the city. So whether that's a joint target for the city that we can all buy into, something like that, maybe not around our own facilities, but where we've got shared opportunities as well. So I think that's something that we could have a look at. I think other than that, it's as an organisation, I think we need to be more outward looking as well. I do think there is established committees, groups. There's stuff that we could contribute better towards, and I think that's something that we're mindful of. I did have the our own anchors meeting this morning within the trust, and it was something that we were talking about, is how do we get more involved, how do we make sure we've got a voice, and is there areas for, you know, opportunities, stuff like travel, citywide travel. There's a lot of discussions going on in that space at the moment, so how do we make sure that we're front and centre there and influencing and contributing. So I think there's these bits on collaboration, but I do think we've got to ask ourselves as an organisation what more we can do to support across the city too.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions on that item? Well, I think Councillor Rafiq's comments and your own kind of sum up really what's the key element, I think, in terms of what we need to do working together and moving forwards. And so I won't repeat that, but thank you ever so much for your time. And it's really good to hear what you're doing. So let's move on to Lorraine.
Perfect technology working, that surprises me. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting us along today. My name's Lorraine. I'm the Strategy and Engagement Lead within the Net Zero programme at the University of Leeds, although the one caveat I will add is that I've been in this role for a month. So when we do get to questions, I have been working sort of on this programme in a different role for around about 3-4 years. But yeah, if there are any questions I can't answer, then please bear with me and I can sort of go back to my team. I'm not sure sort of how familiar everyone is with the University of Leeds Climate Plan, so I'll very briefly touch on that. And then what I want to share today is some of the updates and progress that we've been making so far, and particularly some of the things that we've learned, which I think would be useful to sort of other organisations. So the university approved its climate plan in 2021, and it's made up of 7 separate principles, one of which is delivering net zero, but the other 6 principles cover a wide range of ways that the university can contribute to tackling climate change, ranging from our curriculum through to how we work with the city and partners like Climate Action Leeds and others, as well as kind of how we make decisions, responsible investment and all those kinds of things. In terms of kind of the Delivering Net Zero programme, I just included this chart as a bit of context for you. So the chart on the left shows our baseline carbon footprint. This is a sort of pre-COVID footprint as a total. 8,000 tonnes of CO2, that's scope 1, 2 and 3 combined. But the figures on the sort of right-hand side in the greeny tones, this is what we consider to be in scope for our net zero by 2030 target. And that's scope 1, 2 emissions, but also our business travel and commuting emissions as well. And the main reason for the blue figures not being in our 2030 target, one of the big contributors is that actually they're really difficult to measure, which I know is everybody sort of grappling with. It doesn't mean that they're not a focus for us. They fit within our wider net zero approach and longer term targets, and the aim is to improve our measurements so that we can start to set targets and reduce those as well. In terms of our estate-based emissions, the chart on the right shows what our pathway currently looks like through to 2030. And without sort of worrying too much about the individual parts within that, you'll see that kind of a big chunk of emissions reductions comes later in the period. And part of that is because of those kind of big assets like the GSC, which power a large proportion of our campus, that take a lot of time to be able to put the right sort of interventions in place in order to decarbonise. But we're reviewing this on a continuous basis. We've got meetings looking at actually how can we bring forward some of those emission savings as early as possible, what additional interventions can we kind of do to address that as well. In terms of kind of a little bit more on our scope for delivering net zero, obviously sort of key target is about how we reduce emissions. So for scope 1 and 2, we're looking at around about 90% reduction by 2030. There will need to be some offsetting, but the aim is that that will be very much after reducing emissions, obviously, and working with our academic partners to understand what genuine offsetting or balancing emissions can we do that's going to be real and meaningful to address that. In terms of business travel and commuting, we've got a target of reducing those by 50% for 2030. That's a really challenging area because obviously travel is a really important part of our work as well, in terms of kind of the research side in particular. And as I mentioned, more accurate supply chain emissions calculation. There's a trial project going on at the moment in order to help better understand those, which is going really positively. But alongside that, there's lots of other considerations about how we build resilience and adapt to climate change, how we deliver a just transition. We've got a working group that looks at that specifically across all 7 of our climate principles. And as a university and with our sort of research expertise and resources, we want to be looking at how we use living lab approaches on our net zero programme. So we're not just reducing our own emissions, we're maximising the co-benefits and learnings that we can have to share with other partners, other organisations, both within Leeds and beyond that as well. And there's already a number of projects that are kind of living lab projects within net zero that are underway at the moment, which I will mention later. And as I mentioned before, this kind of idea about how do we develop this academically verified set of offsetting principles so that we can be confident that once we've reduced emissions as far as we can, any offsetting activity that we do is making a real difference and long-term impact. So I wanted to talk you through a bit of our journey to net zero estates. So I'm kind of focusing very specifically on those estates-based emissions. And like I say, that's not because we're not addressing other emissions, it's just kind of the area that we're kind of focusing on today, and happy to take sort of further questions on those as well. Overall, we've kind of been working on this actively for kind of around about 5 years. So in 2019, the university made its first net zero commitment as part of our 7 climate principles, and that was published in 2021 as our climate plan with a supporting pathway to net zero, which set out our approach to how we were going to do that. Over the past few years, we've been doing a large amount of work in terms of feasibility studies across the estate, understanding exactly what interventions are going to have the greatest impact. And that net zero delivery plan was agreed and published in 2023. I'll be able to share a link to some of that later as well. And we're at a really interesting point at the moment because we're at that point where we're switching from that feasibility studies and understanding that kind of what approach is going to have that impact into actually starting to turn that into practice. And there's a lot of things that we've learned along that journey that I think will be really valuable to be able to share. But yeah, it's a really exciting phase when we start to hopefully see a lot more kind of work taking place across our campus. Overall, our approach is kind of, in a way, fairly straightforward. It's how do we decarbonise our heat in particular, considering that we've got this shared asset, the GSC, which provides the bulk of our campus with both heat and electricity. How do we reduce our energy use across the campus, so kind of efficiencies and reducing that energy load? And then how do we balance that electricity use with new-to-earth renewable energy and making sure that that electricity that we are using is as green as possible? But the kind of considerations alongside that as well is how do we deliver this at scale? So not just kind of making difference around the edges, how do we have a really tangible impact on our overall emissions on a very large and complex estate? And with kind of what's essentially a fixed budget in the sense that when we made our initial commitment, which is cost at £154 million over the period, that obviously came in advance of a large sort of changes within sort of the costs. So things like the sort of inflation that we've seen over the last few years, that came in largely after we'd made that commitment. So it's like, actually, how do we make sure we can deliver our commitments within that budget envelope that we have? So in terms of kind of how we approach that, the start point was very much kind of looking at the estate as a whole. So what we want to do is not kind of just focus on specific individual buildings that might kind of be quite nice headlines to be able to say we've made an impact, but actually how can we have the greatest impact across the whole campus? So we looked at our infrastructure and the building sort of use across the whole campus, and what we were looking for was opportunities within buildings that were either high energy use buildings, that were in particular clusters, or where the infrastructure would lend itself to be able to make sort of big impactful differences within that kind of estate. And we identified 21 buildings that we went and did more detailed analysis and feasibility studies within, and we worked with 3 different contractors using sort of shared methodology to be able to do that as quickly as we possibly could. And what we did within those was that we built models of those buildings, we tested different scenarios to understand how we could have the greatest impact in terms of emissions reductions. And this kind of table is just an example for one of the buildings, the mechanical engineering building, looking at the different options that we had available to us. And this gave us some really, really interesting sort of learnings in terms of how we can have greatest impact. So if you look at line 2 within here, this is essentially saying not making any specific building interventions, installing air source heat pumps centrally with high temperature output. The total cost around that was about 3.8 million. And the emissions reductions that we would achieve as a result is around 77%. But if you compare that with some of these figures further down, where, for example, if we're doing a deep retrofit and adding air source heat pumps, the cost for that spirals. So you go from around 3.8 million to around 20 million. But actually, the emissions reductions that you get as a result of that increased investment isn't actually that much more than you would get from changing the actual sort of heat source in the first place. And that's a really important learning that's kind of influenced our approach. Obviously, the other consideration within that as well is actually the disruption that caused. So we know that those really big, deep retrofit projects are hugely disruptive. You need to kind of decamp people out of buildings and kind of keep operations going, and that's really, really challenging. So this kind of model we kind of took across all those 21 buildings to identify actually how can we have the greatest possible impact for the budget that we've got available for us. And one of the kind of first learnings that we have on that is that actually we needed to rethink this kind of intervention hierarchy. So the traditional approach is that you start with the fabric of the building and you essentially insulate a building with an inch of its life, and then you kind of switch the energy source in order to maximise those kind of savings. And that might work on kind of smaller sites and smaller buildings, especially kind of homes, for example, where you've got a much greater sort of variance in terms of the impact that would have. But actually, particularly on kind of an estate of our size and scale, what we need to do is actually flip that hierarchy over. So we start with the renewable. That's the absolute essential that's going to deliver the bulk of emissions reductions. It's not to say that we ignore efficient services and the actual fabric of the building, but actually the way that we're picking that up is through our ongoing maintenance programme. So rather than starting with a major retrofit project, it's actually making sure that as we're going on in terms of building maintenance and upgrades, we're building that into the approach. But the really cool thing is switching that energy source over to renewable. And I think that's something that's kind of a really valuable learning that we're really keen to share more widely. In terms of kind of what that meant in terms of different buildings, this chart, don't worry too much about the detail on it. Kind of the key thing is that across this, it's showing the emissions levels or the sort of heat demand for each individual building across campus. And across the absolute majority of those buildings, the greatest impact we're going to have is by decarbonising the heating. There are, however, as there always is, some exceptions. So, for example, this really big bar here is the Worsley building. That building has some sort of very specific functions within it. For example, it hosts the dental hospital, and one of the requirements of that is that it needs full fresh air ventilation. That's a necessity for the use of that building. So in that kind of very high energy use building, there's a priority to kind of introduce energy saving measures and look at the kind of infrastructure within that building. But across the bulk of the campus, the greatest impact is going to come from decarbonising our heating systems. So what does that look like and how are we doing? It's obviously sort of really important. I'll be able to share the link to this afterwards, but this is essentially an interactive map that we published sharing our net zero delivery plan, where we basically said actually looking across our campus, these are the interventions that are going to have the greatest impact on reducing our emissions. And that includes a number of key projects. So really, really important is increasing our electricity supply to campus. So a lot of our decarbonisation is only going to be possible if we've got a greater electricity capacity, particularly when you look at something like the GSC, which is such a large sort of contributor to our energy. And those are things which have really long timelines and can be very expensive, of course. So it's the sort of thing that we needed to plan really early on, looking at actually what is our energy use likely going to be, working with teaching hospital to understand their requirements as well, to make sure that we can kind of get that in. The Worsley building, as I said, it's the fresh air ventilation is a really big challenge. So the project there is focused on installing heat recovery ventilation, which is going to have a significant impact on reducing energy use within that building. Project number 3 is up at the Brownlee Triathlon Centre, which is really interesting. We've now fully electrified that site, so we've removed the previous biomass boiler and replaced it with air source heat pumps. Once we have renewable energy going into that site, that will be a fully net zero site, and that includes the football hub as well. And that's really important because it's a community resource as much as a sort of university resource as well, and so that's really important to us. And then another really interesting project, labelled number 4 in here, is kind of our mechanical engineering sort of cluster of buildings. And we've been undergoing test drilling for geothermal energy that we hope is going to power a energy centre that's going to power that entire cluster of buildings. That drilling work completed earlier this year. We're currently waiting for the final reports to come back, but it's looking really, really promising. And what's really important about our approach to that is that as well as drilling for our own needs, we've drilled a whole load of kind of monitoring wells across campus, which means we'll be able to add to kind of the research knowledge base of actually what's the impact of use of geothermal and how can that actually help across the wider city region as well. And then project number 5 on there, again, really, really important one, is actually how do we bring in renewable energy? Our approach is very much we want to be investing in new renewable energy rather than kind of taking what's there already, so kind of adding to the supply. We have explored on-campus options, and there will be some on-campus energy generation that we're looking at, including solar panels, which we're kind of working through at the moment. But because of the energy use levels that we have across campus, the bulk of that is likely to be delivered off-site. So we've currently got a tender out at the moment for a power purchase agreement that will help to deliver the first phase of energy use. But this is interactive map. You'll be able to sort of explore it, click through and see our progress on each of those projects as we go through. And I've kind of mentioned a couple of these as well, but I thought it'd be useful to kind of highlight some of those things that we've done so far. So yeah, the geothermal test drilling, as I said, we've drilled a number of wells between 150 and 250 metres, tapping into 2 separate aquifers that sit under kind of like the whole Leeds landscape. So what we learned from that drilling should help other organisations across the region as well. As I said, it's looking really promising, and we hope to be able to share those detailed results when we get all the full reports back. Brownie Triathlon Centre now fully electrified. We've also installed electric vehicle chargers. We're looking at solar panels potentially for that site as well. We're just going through the process at the moment. And another project which kind of sits across our climate principles in the sense that there is a net zero aspect to it, in the sense it's kind of tree planting, carbon capture in that sense, but actually it has a really positive impact on the wider city region, on research and teaching, on public access to green space, is Garewood up in North Leeds, where we've planted 60,000 trees as a research woodland. And yeah, I hope some of you might have already seen that. It's a wonderful site, absolutely love going up there. And we're really looking forward to seeing those kind of trees thrive. And as I said, sort of improving that community access to that space as well. So that's kind of where we've kind of got to at the moment. I thought it'd be useful to kind of just touch on some of the things that we've learned. I think one of the big things is about making sure we're looking across the whole campus and not looking at kind of just the quick wins. Obviously they are really important, and we're actually looking at how we can build in more of those, but making sure we've got that really big picture, those really long critical timelines in terms of things like electricity supply and bigger projects that are going to have a really big impact. Because 2030 is coming at us rather quicker than sometimes we'd like. Making sure that we're tapping into changes that are already happening at UK or regional level, whether that's kind of decarbonisation of the grid or travel and EV infrastructure, making sure we're working with them and not against them. That's something that's been really important. Need for agility and being open to opportunity. So good example of that is that actually the Boddington site, when we first analysed that building, it looked as if it wasn't going to cost in compared to some other projects that we had across campus, but some of the people that were looking at kind of took that opportunity to actually look at it in different ways. So actually, we've got a different way that we can achieve the same goal, which is going to be much more cost effective, and we're able to kind of move quickly to say, actually, yes, we'll bring that into our net zero delivery plan, because that absolutely makes sense, and being agile and responsive to that. It's been really important to have that adequate internal resource. That's been a really important learning for us, is that even though we haven't been doing the physical infrastructure stuff on the ground, we've needed the resource to be able to kind of deliver that really important kind of planning stages, and also that investing in communications engagement. That's something that the sort of creation of my role is partly because of that. We probably haven't done as much as we could have, and that's a really important learning, but particularly when those headline figures are slow to move, because we can't just announce, oh, this is wonderful, we've managed to shave off 10,000 tonnes of CO2. That communications engagement is really important to demonstrate to people that actually we are doing really important work and it will deliver the results, giving them confidence in the plans that we have. And yeah, we hope to be able to do more of that, obviously, as we move into these next stages. So yeah, hopefully that's interesting, and I'm very happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much. I think that was more than interesting. It was absolutely fascinating. So thank you for sharing that with us. Any comments? We'll start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It was really interesting. Just wondering how in-house research and developments link into what you're doing, thinking about the substantial engineering faculty and the wide-ranging climate research. It was good to hear bits on the radio this morning even about clothing and the duration and durability of that and the work that's going on. So yeah, just interested to know how that connects up. Thank you.
Yes, so we work really closely with the colleagues in the Precy Centre for Climate Futures. So obviously they cover the sort of wide range of climate-related research, and from the perspective of the Net Zero programme, we're working with both the Precy Centre and the new Geosolutions Leeds, which was kind of set up as part of our climate plan, essentially, to look at the energy transition. And as I mentioned before, with things like the geothermal drilling, there's kind of an element of we could have just drilled some boreholes and kind of cracked on with it. But actually it's been really important to us that everything that we're doing, we're working with those researchers firstly to identify how can we do this in the best possible way, but also how can we add to the knowledge bank? How can we help answer some of those kind of research questions and those bigger challenges? The sort of geothermal aspect of it is a really good one, because actually there's a real research gap there. There's a knowledge gap about what happens when we start using this at scale. And so it's been really important to be working closely with them. And it's been a really good example of that kind of living lab project, which is kind of a term that we use to kind of talk about how we're doing research and practice at the same time and bringing together kind of colleagues across the university. So it's been a really positive sort of example of that. And yeah, that's something that we'll be looking at throughout the programme. There is, as part of our commitment to net zero, there's a budget fund for living lab research. So as part of that, we'll be going out to sort of our community and saying, actually, where are the research gaps? What are the challenges? What are the things that we can help answer? And there is kind of a seed funding pot to help support some of that research. And that's both within the university and working with like the Net Zero City Principal team, who will look at how does that apply across the wider city region as well, and how can we take these approaches out to other organisations that might need some support from us, but also who we can learn with. And I think that's a really important part of that approach.
Thank you. Did you want to come in?
I think just in terms of the question there, I think it is really important that we do work together, and I think as a good example of that, on the geothermal, we've been working with Dr. Emma Bramham from Institute of Applied Geosciences on a bid for off-gem funding through their Innovation Fund, Innovation Challenge project, to give it its correct title. So yeah, Leeds City Council are working with the university as we aim to. We work with Tom Cooper a lot. He attends our SMT in climate and energy, but I think things like working together on stuff like geothermal opportunities is really exciting. Great opportunity to look at, not just for the university, but potentially citywide. We can look at different opportunities around that, and I think it's really great if we can continue to do that, and hopefully we'll get the funding, which is, I suppose, for the benefit of everyone here, it's to do some drilling initially, but initially to identify locations for that. But longer term, it would be to look at how we can actually develop that infrastructure citywide. So really quite exciting, if you're a geek like me. But anyway.
I think that's very exciting, and also, you know, for the city, it could be huge, couldn't it, in terms of the potential?
It could be. It could be the new Iceland.
Right, thank you. I've lost track of Councillor Thompson. It's Councillor Ronchy was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lorraine. It's a really excellent presentation. I hope you'll be able to share the slides there. So, oh, great, thank you, so that I can look at it in some more detail. You did mention a couple of times about the university being willing to share its expertise and your experience. I'm wondering to what extent any of this sharing might be marketable in a potential income stream. Whether this is something that you think sort of might have commercial potential for the university, or is it more in the sort of a commitment along the lines of a commitment to a green plan? What do you think? Thank you.
It's a really good question, and probably one that's slightly above my pay grade to decide on. I think in terms of our approach to net zero is that we, as a university, want to share knowledge. We're there to kind of create knowledge and share it. So my feeling is that our first instinct wouldn't be to use that to make money out of, because actually it's for the wider benefit. That's not to say that there aren't commercial opportunities within there. It's not something that we're focusing on within the net zero team. But obviously there are funding challenges across universities and all sectors. So yeah, it's certainly not something that's front of mind. It's yeah, we're keen to sort of be sharing that learning and working with others.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Stables.
I was actually going to make the same point about the geothermal, because I was going to say, can we connect that with the council and then to community energy and, you know, take it out from the city centre outwards, which I think is incredibly exciting. Sounds like an amazing opportunity. And my other question was around, fantastic about the planting on Garewood. I wasn't aware of it. Is that Leeds University land, or if it wasn't, how did you obtain it? And if it is, are there other plots of land where you might have a similar opportunity?
It is University of Leeds owned land, so it was previously owned by the university and leased out. But yeah, we took that opportunity to kind of use that for the tree planting project, and I think the benefits of it, as I say, are so broad, because there's a carbon benefit, there's a community access benefit. So once the trees were established, the plan is to open pathways throughout the site to improve access to green space and connect sort of green corridors. It's probably, as far as I'm aware, it's kind of the bigger patch of land that was kind of suitable for that type of project. For things like tree planting and biodiversity initiatives, all those things, that's something that we're looking at across the whole university. So we're working at the moment on a biodiversity plan across our sites. We've done a series of baselining studies to understand what's there at the moment and how we can deliver sort of biodiversity net gain across all of our sites. That's definitely something that's being worked on across the university. And again, with the woodland, we hope that the research that's being done there will help to kind of inform other projects of a similar nature as well. So it would be about how do we share that, how do we make sure we're supporting other projects outside of the university as well.
Just a quick follow-up. I'm just wondering actually whether you working with planning and parks within the council in terms of biodiversity net gain, and how we might use that knowledge in terms of biodiversity in order to move forward with the commitment that we have to have as a city in terms of developments, helping to enable development through biodiversity net gain.
It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I would imagine that there probably is some interaction at some level. I could certainly raise a question. If there's anybody that would like sort of an introduction to the team that are working on that, then I'm happy to facilitate that as well.
Thank you. Any other council officers know about a BNG link with Leeds Uni whilst we've got you here?
I don't directly, but I suspect Emma Trickett in Green Spaces will, as the BNG lead, so we can take that away.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this item? So can I just ask one? It follows on from, I guess, a number of people who've been interested in developing the learning, because I think one of the things you've shared with us is that you have amazing learning, and certainly the things that are on this what have we learnt slide, I would say would probably be applicable to any of the anchor institutions across the city. So I wondered if this specific what have we learnt piece has been shared amongst the anchor network, or are there plans to do so?
Yep, so we shared a version of this presentation at the climate subgroup in September, which is where this kind of conversation kind of initiated from. And as I said, we're kind of, with having come into this role relatively recently, that's part of my kind of remit, is to kind of look at actually how can we better share this across different groups. So if there's any opportunities that you think would be worth us kind of sharing with, or connections, then I'd be very happy to hear those.
Brilliant. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and write at the same time. Thank you. I mean, that's really good, because for us as a committee looking at the whole city, then I think this is a really important piece of work that everybody can benefit from. So, yeah, thank you for that offer. We'll definitely take you up on that one. Okay, so in the absence of any more questions, Andrew, did you want to finish with any comments before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the report to see if I made any recommendations. So the report says the recommendation is for the members to note the updates from the NHS Trust of the University of Leeds, as well as the longer term ambitions for the Leeds Anchor Network and for the city. And I think particularly what we want to try and do is be more explicit about the contribution of the different anchors, but also the areas where we've got things in common and we're on different areas of that sort of developmental plan. I'm not sure, I mean, we've got an anchors climate group meeting on the 22nd of this month as well, so I can take that any other feedback to that meeting as well.
Thank you. So are we happy to support that recommendation? So we most definitely are, and clearly this is a really important piece of the jigsaw for the whole of the city. So thank you very much for your contributions. Thanks for giving up your time, and thank you for making those introductions, Andrew. It's been really, really interesting to hear about the work that's going on, and will be a big part of our journey as a city. So thank you very much. You are free to go if you would like to, or free to stay if you'd like to stay. Thank you. Okay, so in the tradition of moving backwards through the agenda today, I am now going to go to the minutes, which I left until later because Paul was limited in the amount of time he could spend with us. So I just thought the quicker we got onto that section, the better. So the minutes that we've got to agree are for the last formal in-person meeting, which was in July, which I think we discussed at the last consultative meeting, but we do need to formally approve those. And then the ones from the last consultative meeting as well. So the first ones are in the pack, agenda item 6 it was, where have I put them? 666. Right, okay. So that's on page 5 of the pack that you've got in front of you. So what I'll do is I'll go through them all, as always, page by page, and then we can pick up on any corrections you'd like to make and any matters arising. So the first one, Monday, 22nd of July meeting, we had some updates that we were awaiting from the previous meeting, and Rachel, you came back to us with the Leeds Pipes number, didn't you? And that was that we had 47 customers on the waiting list, 26 were high priority, and that means they're likely to be connected first. Is that correct? And we're still awaiting the details of the other one, which Rachel was hoping would have been chased up while she was on leave, but hasn't been. So anybody else got anything on that page? Okay, page 6. Thank you to Councillor Bromley, who did invite Horsforth Climate Action, and we've seen them today. Okay, page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. And page 13. Okay, so we're happy to agree those as a true record. Thank you. So then the next ones, which I think went out as part of the supplementary pack, is that correct? They've got page 3 on them, and they're from Monday, the 23rd of September. So anything on page 3? Yes. Yeah, we can wait a minute for you to have a look at them.
Because I have got something to say on this, but I don't know what page it is.
Yeah, fine, no problem.
Thank you, sorry.
Right, so page 3 was the... Oops. I'm back on
Oh,
there.
yeah, it was,
page 3 was the first page.
Page
so.
4, yeah.
So, page 4.
It was just in terms of the BEAT project, just to say it mentions that it's within the Wetherby ward, and just to say it actually goes into the Harewood ward as well, just so that you're aware of that. It goes into Collingham. That was all.
Okay, thank you. Can we make that correction then, so that it covers both of the wards? And I have been in touch with the programme, and Councillor Harrington and I are going to visit them soon. Yes, can't remember it. So, yeah, that should be fascinating. Okay, thank you. Anybody else on page 4? Okay, so page 5.
Where are we with that?
So that's the next item on the agenda, and Rachel's going to fill us in on where we are with that. Yeah, well, you can be forgiven for not thinking it is the next item on the agenda because I've skipped around a lot. It was early in the agenda, and it's now later. Yeah.
It's not on the agenda, formal agenda then?
Well, I guess if it doesn't have a number, does that mean it's not on the formal agenda?
It's not on the formal page.
Okay.
Sorry, otherwise I would have shut up.
Apologies, but that's the next thing we will discuss is Rachel talking about working group. So if you can just bear with us 1 minute, we'll be on that soon. So apologies for that. I just wanted to pick up on the paragraph just above that one about the climate ambassadors. So I'm going to be meeting with them this week, and I did meet with Jen again from the RHS with a view to us getting all the schools that are eligible signed up. I mean, that was really our commitment to say that if there's funding available, it's absolutely vital that we make sure schools are aware. And I was already contacted by a counsellor who said that he was in touch with a school who hadn't been aware of it, and it's just one of those illustrations about if things fall into a generic school inbox, they can get missed. But once he made personal contact with the school, they said that they would sign up. So just emphasising really, make sure if you have eligible schools in your ward that you share the information with them. Okay, so page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. 10. Page 11. And page 12. Okay, so we're happy to agree those. Thank you for that. And the next thing that I wanted to go on to was Rachel with a working groups update.
Thank you, Chair. So, so we've been a little bit slow, unfortunately, getting them sorted just due to the fact multiple CDP submissions and exec board reports, and unfortunately my own time off. I say unfortunately, but my own time off. So we've got pencils in provisionally, which will be going out after this meeting. We're looking at the first week of December, sort of the afternoon of the 3rd of December, to have our first workshop as such in the new format. The topics themselves are to be determined for definite, but we're looking at having them where there'll be specific themes as such. So on this occasion, it might be more focusing around the green spaces and biodiversity and different elements of those topics that have been discussed in main committee. I believe as well, we obviously, as mentioned earlier, we've talked about having one relating to the, obviously, donut that we mentioned earlier. And I think as well, we've also got one that obviously was dispelling to do with the comms and engagement, and then obviously about the myth busting. So the intention is for the first one to be, like say, in the afternoon of the 3rd of December. It's likely to be from 1 o'clock. We just need to make sure we don't clash with, obviously, as you understand, the different meetings that go on. But I will be sending, by the end of the week, you'll all have the invitation, but the invitation itself extends to obviously all members. And if there is any other topics that have not already been mentioned, then again, feel free to forward them through, because we're hoping to make sure that we've got almost like a theme each time, but the idea is then we've got like quite a few external speakers and people can help us as well with the workshops.
Or are they going to be in person?
I would imagine the workshops are probably more likely to be online, because obviously with the reach being a greater forum as such, so and yeah. And it means then obviously we can have external speakers join them a bit easier and obviously present like that. So yeah, they will be online, will those?
Just I wanted to know how long we anticipate them being.
Last session, they were 2 hours, weren't they, for each workshop? So if we went from 1 till 3, would that work? Okay, so any more questions for Rachel on working groups? Right, so just to finish off then, so the next meeting is the 16th of December. It's at 10 o'clock in the morning and it is in here, and I'm reiterating that because I think that was the last one that I asked Toby if we could have it as a physical meeting. So it is a physical meeting in here.
I'll check the January one as well. I think the January might be physical, but I think we tend to do the first one of the year, don't we? And maybe the last one of the municipal year is physical as well. So I think they were booked in already.
Yeah, we do. That. What I should have said was that.
Yeah, the ones you asked me to review.
They were the only ones that was the one I asked you to review. Whereas the oh, mind you, I've got January down as a remote.
I can go back and check and do it. At least I think they're on all the invites. It's highlighted which ones are.
What I've got here is an email, Toby, that you sent out to all of us, and I've just got a copy of that, so we should all have that. But actually, it might be helpful for you to resend it out so that we're all really clear about where we're at and we're not sitting waiting to join an online meeting when we shouldn't be, if that's okay. And then I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending, and particularly officers who today had lots of last-minute changes and coped very admirably, and nobody's shouted at me. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And the item that we've had to slip will be in the December meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.